hopefully everyone can see my screen. Yep.
Yes,
Great.
perfectly. We can see your presentation.
Perfect.
And
Excellent.
your camera seems to have that bug again.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, I'll see what I can do around that one. So, my apologies for that. Yeah, it was happening. Yep,
I think now has stopped. No, it's still on.
that's right.
But maybe you
What
can
I might do,
continue and colleagues can see your presentation.
yeah, I'll do that, and then I can turn on the video afterwards as well. So that's okay. All right. So yeah, so thanks everyone. Really appreciate everyone's time today. So my name is Jonathan. I'm the founder and CEO of NovaWorks. And so as a bit of a background on terms of who we are, just in case people haven't actually heard of us before, we really do specialize in parliamentary solutions, and we've been working with parliaments for nearly probably 17 and probably nearly 17 to 20 years now around the world. And, you know, we've actually gone through lots of different iterations by developing applications, that's on-premise or hybrid and now cloud as well, for different parliaments and different business requirements, different workflows. And really, we're now sort of starting to leverage artificial intelligence for a range of use cases, which I'm going to go through some of those actually today as well for everyone. One of the actual things I'd like to sort of say up front as well is that we tend to advocate for AI to supplement, not to replace the work of Parliament. And really, it's all about enhancing the services that are delivered by the Parliament as well. So we really do try to make sure that the use cases that we're actually leveraging here is really about supplementing information, not necessarily replacing the work of Parliament. And, you know, classic example of that would be, say, within Hansard and the use of automatic transcripts and a whole range of other things. And for me, the analogy is really around, that is a use case for generative AI as an example, but you know, for me, it's saying that we're actually moving away from what I call low-level repetitive tasks, and then really about moving it into the future and saying, well, actually, now let's get people to focus on high-value tasks rather than low-level repetitive tasks as well. So let's get into some of the use cases and actually screenshots from our system as well. So this is a really interesting way which we're actually using artificial intelligence within parliaments. And this is actually some examples of this is real information, real bills, real transcripts, and a range of other things as well. And the first thing we sort of are really focusing our attention on, one of the areas, and this is more towards both the internal use cases and also the external use cases and actually dealing with citizens as well, is the use of a more question and answer and a chat and conversation interaction type of approach as well. So as you can sort of see in this particular two screenshots, we've got, for example, what were the new bills introduced today? And it can actually go through, it already knows that, okay, well, the Legislative Council was sitting and these are the things. So it's actually saying that they're actually putting an amendment into this one. They're doing, you know, certain other ones. And one of the really interesting parts of this as well is that we also make sure that, and this is, I think, a really important part of this use case as well, is that information is drawn from trusted documents. So, and conversations is limited to answering those sort of scope questions as well with trusted content. So the content that you're seeing here is only then used within the parliamentary context as well. So we're not looking at Google, we're not looking at ChatGPT, or we're not looking at any other sort of system as well. And we're providing a citation back to the original source as well. So what we call that, as an example, is that we make sure that whatever artificial intelligence that we're using around this is actually does not generate answers that are ungrounded from non-trusted source information. And making sure that you do provide citations is really one part of that user experience to develop the trust side of things. So when we look at artificial intelligence, generative AI, etc., um, trust is really, really important when we look at artificial intelligence and the adoption of artificial intelligence within Parliament. And I've got in another session as well, I've got around the cybersecurity side of things and the flow-on effects around that as well. And what are some of the sort of mitigations which we can actually then put in place around that. But we want to make sure that we're leveraging the trusted content that the Parliament is actually trusting to use, such as the Hansard or the transcripts or the legislation or the bills or the amendments. So the content is grounded according to the actual data which is then introduced into that model. So we're finding a lot of really good use cases around the chat and conversation interaction or the question and answering type of things as well. So, and you can actually say, for example, what happened in question time today, as an example. So, and then they can give you a summary of the major points which actually happened in question time. So, who was actually speaking, who were the actual members speaking, and a whole range of really interesting things. And again, you can see where all those citations are as well. So number one, number two, up to number five citations for those particular parts as well. And this is all providing that sort of real-time summarization occurring as we actually happen. So, as you're actually during a chamber sitting or during a committee sitting, you can start typing in here and content is actually flowing back to you in a meaningful way. The other sort of really interesting part of this use case is that because we can actually look at all this data in different ways, we can actually analyze that information to classify it, to grab sentiment analysis, entity extraction as well. So when we're doing, say, for example, giving evidence, so a citizen is giving evidence or communicating with the Parliament or a member of Parliament, etc., they can automatically define what the sentiment is of that content, classify that content. You could actually then moderate that content as well. So if we look at moderation, we actually do that right now for what I call offensive or abusive content, as an example. So as the Right Honourable was sort of just saying as well, is that with the advent of social media and the influx of social media is that a lot of content may be unsavory, as an example. So the use of artificial intelligence can be actually used to scan for content which is actually not really in an appropriate way to actually be interacting with the Parliament as well. As you sort of saw from the previous slides, search. So you can have a conversation with search, but also you can have find information a lot easier as well with that sort of artificial intelligence. And again, making sure that search results are, grounded and, we want to make sure that you can still leverage, say, your large language models or your LLMs, as we sort of call them. So you can leverage the sort of natural language, as sort of Louis was sort of saying, we've got a session around natural language and the application around that and around artificial intelligence. But we can actually leverage an LLM, but not actually put our data in the larger models as well. So that will actually then get incorporated into global content. And we can have our own silo, which we can actually then use for artificial intelligence around that as well. Summarization is a really, really, really important part of our solution set. So you might have, for example, 1,000 bits of evidence submitted to a committee or a particular inquiry as an example. And so we can actually then summarize submissions or summarize content or find duplicates or find pre-canned. So an example of a submission to an inquiry might be a templated one from a particular organization. So they might go to their member base and say, please copy and paste this and send it to this particular inquiry and the only thing which is changing is their name and their address. So we can detect that using AI to say, well, actually, this is a templated response. We can then allocate that under one response and we can then clean it up. So you don't have to go through thousands and thousands of bits of content. So, you can summarize legislation, make it in a meaningful way, or even actually review constituencies, correspondence as well, to name a few bits of content. And as you can sort of see here, we've got entity information. We've actually got integration, say, with even Microsoft Word, and the website as well, where you can actually click on buttons to use artificial intelligence to actually even summarize submissions, as an example. Another one is, really about I like to actually use, for example, a simplification of language. So as we sort of were just discussing, an example of that, would be the sort of very formal presentation of language. So that might be, say, for that present Parliament, pursuant to Section 51 of the Commissioner for Children and Young People Act. So it's a very formal language. And so, again, we can use artificial intelligence to then have it as a bit more of a natural language flow. So breaking it down into words that a lot more people would actually then understand as well. So, and again, as the Right Honourable was sort of saying, member was saying that you could even target it for children, or you could target it for adolescents or for senior citizens, as an example, if you understand how those sort of AI models are actually then working. So generative AI, we can use for a whole range of different scenarios. So that could be for legislative drafting, it could be for simplification of language, it could be for automated translation services, so to reach out to more and more people. So in a multilingual, environment as well. If you are dealing with constituencies, and citizens as well, so you can actually then draft responses back into them, so legislators can actually focus on more complex inquiries, as an example. So there are lots of different use cases, and sort of this is a bit of a presentation in terms of what we can actually then do around some of those different scenarios. So yeah, that does conclude some of my use cases, and I'd like to sort of open up to the floor and yeah, obviously ask any particular questions.